Nobody was supposed to open that suitcase. Not the customs officers. Not the security team. Not even the decorated Homeland Security supervisor who had cleared over 10,000 bags in her 22-year career. But a German shepherd named Duke had other plans. And what they discovered inside would send shockwaves through every news station in America, revealing a secret so powerful, so heartbreaking, that grown men wept openly in the middle of Chicago O'Hare International Airport. But here's the part that still gives me chills. The bag had circled that carousel 17 times. 17. Not a single passenger claimed it. Not a single person even looked at it. It was almost like someone wanted it to disappear. Like someone had planned for it to vanish into the system, forgotten, abandoned, never to be found. So why did Duke refuse to leave its side? Why did this highly trained customs dog suddenly break protocol, ignore his handler's commands, and begin howling, actually howling, at a worn military duffel bag with nothing but a faded American flag stitched onto its side? The answer will change the way you see loyalty forever. But first, you need to understand what really happened that frozen February morning, and why the truth was almost buried before anyone could find it. Now, before we dive deeper into this incredible story, I need you to do something for me. If you believe in the unbreakable bond between humans and animals, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a comment below telling me, have you ever witnessed a dog do something that seemed almost supernatural? Something that made you believe they understand far more than we give them credit for? I want to hear your stories. And while you're at it, smash that like button because it helps more animal lovers like you find these stories. Trust me, you're going to want to be part of this community for what's coming next. Now let's get back to Duke and the mystery that would captivate an entire nation. It was a frozen February morning at Chicago O'Hare International Airport. The kind of morning where the wind cut through your coat like a knife. The kind of morning where the fluorescent lights inside the terminal hummed louder than usual, casting that pale, sterile glow over everything. The smell of stale coffee hung heavy in the customs hall, mixing with the recycled air that had been breathed by a million travelers before. Outside, snow was falling. Inside, chaos was building. A delayed Lufthansa flight from Frankfurt, Germany had just touched down on the icy runway. 400 exhausted passengers spilled into the international arrivals area like a wave of confusion and fatigue. Babies crying in their mothers' arms. Business travelers barking into their phones, already stressed about missed connections. College students dragging overstuffed backpacks, wondering if their luggage had survived the journey. It was organized madness. The kind of controlled chaos that customs officers dealt with every single day. But this day was different. This day would change everything. Officer Jake Morrison had been working customs at O'Hare for 7 years. 7 long years of overnight shifts that blurred into early mornings. 7 years of bitter coffee that never quite warmed him up. 7 years of fluorescent lights that made everyone look tired, even when they weren't. 7 years of scanning bags, checking passports, asking the same questions over and over again, and watching thousands upon thousands of travelers pass through without incident. He thought he'd seen everything. He really did. Counterfeit designer goods stuffed inside children's toys. Illegal substances hidden in shampoo bottles, disguised so cleverly that only the most trained eye, or nose, could detect them. Exotic reptiles taped to a man's chest, their tiny hearts beating against his skin as he tried to walk through security like nothing was wrong. Once, Jake even found $40,000 in cash wrapped in aluminum foil, stuffed inside a giant container of protein powder. The man claimed he'd forgotten it was there. Jake didn't believe him for a second. Nothing surprised him anymore. Or so he believed. His partner was a different story. Duke was a 5-year-old German shepherd with a coat the color of midnight and tan, eyes that seemed to see straight through you, and a reputation that bordered on supernatural. He wasn't just any detection dog. He was the best. The absolute best. 3 official commendations hung on the wall of the customs office, each one bearing Duke's name. Over 200 successful detections were logged in his file. Drug smugglers. Contraband. Illegal agricultural products that could have devastated American farms. Duke had found them all. The officers joked that Duke could smell a lie before it even left someone's mouth. They said he could detect fear from 50 feet away. They said he knew things, understood things, that no ordinary dog should understand. Jake had been Duke's handler for 3 years. In that time, he'd come to trust Duke more than he trusted most humans. When Duke alerted, Jake listened. When Duke was calm, Jake relaxed. They were partners in every sense of the word. But that morning, Duke did something he had never done in his entire career. And Jake knew instantly, deep in his bones, that something was terribly, terribly wrong. The International Arrivals Hall was a symphony of noise. Shoes squeaking on polished floors. Rolling suitcases rumbling like distant thunder. Announcements crackling over the speakers in that robotic voice that never quite sounded human. The hum of conversation in a dozen different languages, blending together into a wall of sound. Jake walked Duke through the inspection lines, letting the dog do what he did best. Duke's ears rotated like satellite dishes, picking up invisible signals that humans couldn't comprehend. His nose twitched constantly, sampling the air, cataloging scents, searching for anything out of place. Duke moved calmly, professionally, predictably. He passed a family from Brazil without a second glance. He walked by a group of elderly tourists from Japan, their suitcases covered in stickers from around the world. He ignored a nervous businessman clutching his briefcase too tightly. The man was just scared of flying, nothing more. Everything was routine. Until Duke reached baggage carousel 7. That's when everything changed. Duke froze mid-step. It wasn't a gradual stop. It wasn't a hesitation. It was like someone had pressed pause on a video. One moment he was walking, and the next, he was completely, utterly still. Every muscle in his powerful body locked into place. His ears pressed forward so hard they trembled with the effort. His tail, usually relaxed and swaying, went rigid as a steel rod. A growl, low and guttural, rumbled from somewhere deep in his chest. It was a sound Jake had rarely heard. A sound that meant danger. Jake felt ice slide down his spine. "Duke? What's going on, boy?" Duke didn't respond. Didn't even blink. His dark eyes were fixed on a single object, tracking it as it moved slowly around the carousel. A beaten olive-green military duffel bag. It was old. Worn. The kind of bag that had seen things. Been places. The fabric was faded in patches, the zippers tarnished with age. There were scuff marks along the bottom, as if it had been dragged across 100 different surfaces. And on the side, barely visible against the olive canvas, was a single patch. An American flag. Faded. Frayed at the edges. But unmistakable. The bag circled the carousel slowly, methodically, like it had all the time in the world. It had been circling for a while now. Jake realized he'd seen it pass by at least 3 times since he'd entered the area. Maybe more. Nobody touched it. Nobody claimed it. It was almost like it was waiting. Then Duke barked. But this wasn't his trained alert bark. This wasn't the sharp, precise sound he made when he detected drugs or explosives. This wasn't protocol. This was something raw. Something primal. Something desperate. It was the sound of an animal trying to communicate something his handler couldn't possibly understand. A sound that seemed to come from the very core of Duke's being, filled with an urgency that made Jake's blood run cold. Duke barked again. And again. Each bark more insistent than the last. Then he started pulling. Duke never pulled. He was too well trained for that. But now, he was straining against his leash with everything he had, trying to get closer to that bag. His claws scraped against the polished floor. His muscles bunched and flexed. A whine escaped his throat, high-pitched, almost panicked. Duke. Duke, heal. But Duke didn't heal. For the first time in 3 years, he completely ignored his handler's command. Jake's hand instinctively moved to his radio. His mind was racing, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. In all his years, in all his training, he had never witnessed a detection dog behave this way. Never. Duke wasn't alerting for drugs. The behavior was wrong. He wasn't alerting for explosives. The signals didn't match. This was something else entirely. And then, in a flash of terrible clarity, Jake understood. Duke wasn't signaling that something dangerous was inside that bag. He was signaling that something was alive. Jake's blood turned to ice. His heart hammered against his ribs. For a moment, the chaos of the airport faded away, and all he could see was Duke, straining toward that mysterious bag, trying to tell him something that words couldn't express. "This is Morrison," Jake spoke into his radio, his voice tight. "I need backup at Carousel 7. Now." Duke is alerting on an unattended bag, and it's It's not a standard alert. Something's wrong. Something's very wrong. The response was immediate. Within 4 minutes, the entire section was evacuated. TSA agents in blue uniforms formed a perimeter around Carousel 7, their faces tense, their hands ready. Armed Homeland Security officers in tactical gear cleared the surrounding gates, pushing confused passengers back with firm commands. Local Chicago PD secured every exit within 300 feet, their radios crackling with urgent updates. The carousel was stopped. The bag sat motionless now, isolated on the silver metal surface like an unexploded bomb. Passengers pressed against the glass barriers, phones raised, recording everything. Hundreds of tiny screens captured the scene, ready to upload to social media the moment they understood what was happening. Nobody knew yet, but everyone sensed it was big. The air itself seemed to thicken. Conversations died away. Even the crying babies seemed to quiet, as if the entire airport was holding its breath. And in the center of it all, Duke sat rigid beside Jake, his eyes never leaving that bag. He had stopped barking now. Stopped pulling. He just stared, his entire being focused on the olive-green duffel with the faded American flag. He was waiting. They were all waiting. Supervisor Linda Chun arrived with her jaw tight and her eyes sharp as razors. 22 years with Customs and Border Protection had carved lines into her face, but her gaze was as clear and focused as ever. She'd handled bomb threats that never made the news. Biological scares that would have caused nationwide panic if the public ever found out. International incidents that were buried so deep, even Congress didn't know about them. Nothing fazed her. But when she saw Duke, decorated, disciplined, legendary Duke, sitting frozen beside an unidentified bag, something flickered in her eyes. Something that looked almost like fear. "Talk to me, Morrison. What do we have?" Jake shook his head slowly, the words catching in his throat. "I don't know, ma'am. I've never seen Duke react like this. He won't leave that bag. He's not alerting for drugs. He's not alerting for explosives. It's different. It's completely different." Linda studied the duffel bag, her mind racing through every possibility. No name tag. No identification. No airline tracking sticker. Just that worn American flag patch, faded and frayed at the edges. "Who does it belong to?" she demanded. "That's the problem." Jake swallowed hard, forcing the words out. According to the airline manifest, nobody on that flight checked this bag. It's not registered to any passenger. There's no record of it anywhere in the system. Linda's eyes narrowed to dangerous slits. Then how did it get on the plane? Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. The question hung in the air like smoke. How did an unregistered bag end up on an international flight? How did it bypass every security checkpoint in Frankfurt? How did it make it through baggage handling, cargo screening, and customs inspection without a single flag being raised? Someone had made this happen. Someone with access. Someone with connections. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. But why? What was inside that bag that was worth this level of deception? Jake looked down at Duke. The dog hadn't moved. Hadn't blinked. His focus was absolute, unwavering, almost supernatural. Duke knew. He knew something was in there. Something alive. Something that needed help. Linda Chun took a deep breath. She looked at the bag. She looked at Duke. She looked at the hundreds of phones recording every second of this moment. And then she made a decision that would change everything. "Open it," she ordered. Jake knelt beside the carousel, his fingers trembling despite his training. Duke pressed against his leg, whimpering now, a sound so uncharacteristic, so utterly out of place, that it made the surrounding officers exchange nervous glances. The zipper was old. Corroded. It resisted at first, then gave way with a low grinding sound. Slowly, inch by inch, Jake opened the bag. The smell hit him first. Earthy. Warm. Unmistakably alive. And then he saw what was inside. And his heart shattered into a million pieces. What Jake Morrison discovered in that bag would haunt him for the rest of his life. It would make headlines across America. It would be shared millions of times on social media. It would make grown men weep and restore faith in humanity for people who had given up believing. But the true story, the story behind the story, was even more shocking. Because hidden beneath what Jake found was a secret that had been buried for years. A secret that connected a fallen soldier, an underground network of heroes, and a German shepherd who somehow knew that his family was calling out for help. The next 60 seconds would change everything. And nothing would ever be the same again. For tiny bodies huddled together inside the bag. German shepherd puppies. They were impossibly small. So small that Jake's mind struggled to process what he was seeing. Their ribs were visible beneath patchy fur that should have been thick and healthy. Their eyes were closed, crusted with dried tears. Their breathing was shallow, labored, barely there at all. They were wrapped in a torn military jacket, clinging to each other with what little strength remained. The fabric was stained and worn, but Jake could make out the name stitched across the chest pocket. A name that meant nothing to him in that moment, but would soon mean everything. One of them, the smallest, wasn't moving at all. Its tiny chest was still. Its body was limp. While its siblings pressed against it for warmth, this one lay motionless, as if it had already given up the fight. Linda Chen covered her mouth with her hand. Her voice came out as a whisper, cracked with emotion she rarely showed. Dear God. Jake couldn't speak, couldn't move. He just stared at those four tiny creatures, his mind racing through the horror of what they must have endured. Hours in a dark cargo hold. No food. No water. No mother to comfort them. Just darkness and cold and the deafening roar of airplane engines. How long had they been in there? How were any of them still alive? Jake immediately reached for his radio, his training finally kicking through the shock. This is Morrison at Carousel 7. I need emergency veterinary support immediately. We have live animals in critical condition. Repeat, live animals in critical condition. They need medical attention now. The radio crackled with responses. Units were being dispatched. Help was coming. But it was Duke who did something that made every single officer in that hall freeze in place. The massive German shepherd, the legendary detection dog who had never once broken protocol in his entire career, slowly lowered himself to the ground beside the open bag. He moved with a gentleness that seemed impossible for an animal his size. Careful. Deliberate. As if he understood exactly how fragile these tiny creatures were. Then he stretched his neck forward and began licking the motionless puppy. Softly. Rhythmically. Over and over again. His tongue moved across the tiny face with infinite tenderness, cleaning the crusted eyes, stimulating the cold skin, trying to spark life back into a body that seemed beyond saving. It was like watching a parent refuse to give up on a child. The officers stood frozen, transfixed by the scene unfolding before them. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Some of them had tears streaming down their faces, though they would never admit it later. Duke whimpered as he worked, a sound that came from somewhere deep in his soul. It wasn't a sound of training or instinct. It was a sound of desperation, of love, of an animal reaching across an impossible divide to save another. As if he was saying, hold on. Please hold on. Help is coming. And then, something miraculous happened. The smallest puppy twitched. Just barely. Just a tiny movement of one paw. A flutter of breath that was almost invisible. But it was there. Duke had felt it before anyone else did. He pressed closer, licking more urgently now, his whimpers turning into soft, encouraging sounds. He was willing this puppy to live with every fiber of his being. The veterinary team arrived within minutes, rushing through the cleared terminal with cases of equipment and portable incubators. They worked quickly, professionally, their hands steady despite the emotional weight of what they were witnessing. One by one, the puppies were carefully lifted from the bag and assessed. Dehydration, malnutrition, hypothermia. The list of conditions was devastating, but not hopeless. They were fighters, these little ones. They had survived against impossible odds. But here's where the first twist hit. When the veterinary team carefully lifted the last puppy from the bag, the smallest one, the one Duke had refused to give up on, they discovered something hidden beneath the litter. A sealed envelope. It was pressed flat against the bottom of the bag, partially hidden by the torn military jacket. White paper, slightly crumpled, with handwriting visible through the thin material. One of the veterinary technicians held it up. There's something else in here. It looks like a letter. Linda Chun stepped forward, her supervisor instincts taking over. Let me see that. She took the envelope carefully, turning it over in her hands. There was no return address. No postage. Just a name and location written in shaky handwriting. Sarah Mitchell. 1847, Oak Street. Springfield, Illinois. Linda's brow furrowed. Sarah Mitchell. Does that name mean anything to anyone? Blank stares. Head shakes. Nobody recognized it. Jake looked down at Duke, who had finally stepped back from the puppies now that the medical team had taken over. But the dog's eyes were still fixed on them, watching every movement, every procedure. "Open it," Jake said quietly. "Whatever's in there, it might explain all of this." Linda hesitated for just a moment. Then she carefully broke the seal and removed the letter inside. The paper was dated 3 weeks earlier. The handwriting was uneven, as if written by someone whose hands were trembling. Some words were smudged, possibly by tears. At the bottom, a signature. A rank. A name. Linda began to read, her voice steady at first but growing tighter with each sentence. And as the words filled the silent customs hall, everything changed. Because this wasn't just a letter. It was a confession. A farewell. And a mystery that would unravel secrets buried for years. Who was Sarah Mitchell? Who had written this letter? And why did the final line make Supervisor Linda Chun, a woman who had seen everything, go completely pale? The answer was about to break hearts across America. The letter trembled in Linda Chen's hands as she read aloud, her voice cutting through the heavy silence of the customs hall. "Sarah, if you're reading this, then I didn't make it home." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Every officer, every security agent, every person within earshot felt the weight of that single sentence crash down upon them. Linda continued, her professional composure beginning to crack. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything, for the years of silence, for the distance, for all the things I should have said but never did. For choosing duty over family. For missing Mom's funeral because I was deployed. For never meeting your son, my nephew, because I was too scared to face what I'd become." Jake watched as Linda's eyes moved across the page, seeing her throat constrict with each word. Behind him, Duke remained perfectly still, as if he too was listening to every syllable. "I couldn't leave them behind. They saved me when I had nothing left. When the darkness was too heavy, when the nights were endless, when I couldn't remember why I was still breathing, they gave me a reason to see the morning." Linda paused, swallowing hard before continuing. "Please take care of them. They deserve the life I couldn't give them. I know it's not fair to ask this of you. I know I have no right. But they're innocent in all of this. They didn't choose to be born in a war zone. They didn't choose to lose their mother. They only knew how to love, even when surrounded by death." The veterinary team working on the puppies had stopped to listen. One of them was openly crying now, tears streaming down her face as she gently stroked the smallest puppy's tiny head. "Tell Mom I love her. Tell Dad I finally understand why he served. Why he never talked about Vietnam. Why he drank himself to sleep every night. I understand it all now. The weight. The ghosts. The faces that never leave you." Linda's voice cracked on the next line. "I hope one day you'll forgive me. For everything I was. For everything I wasn't. For everything I'll never be." She looked up from the letter, meeting Jake's eyes. "It's signed, your brother, Sergeant Michael Mitchell, United States Army. 3rd Infantry Division. Operation Enduring Freedom." The name meant nothing to most of the people in that hall. But within hours, it would mean everything. Linda immediately pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen as she searched military databases. What she found made her stomach drop. "Sergeant Michael Mitchell," she read from her screen. 31 years old. 3 tours in Afghanistan. 2 Bronze Stars. 1 Purple Heart. Stationed at Forward Operating Base Chapman, Khost Province. She scrolled further, her expression growing darker. Status: killed in action. February 15th. Vehicle accident on base. 3 days ago. 3 days ago. The same day this bag would have been loaded onto a plane in Germany. Jake felt the pieces clicking together in his mind, forming a picture that made no sense and perfect sense at the same time. He's dead. Jake asked, though the answer was obvious. Then who put these puppies on that plane? Linda was already making calls, her voice sharp and professional as she connected with military contacts, airline security, anyone who might have answers. But while she searched for the how, Jake found himself thinking about the why. He looked at the puppies, now wrapped in warming blankets, tiny oxygen masks covering their faces. They were so small, so vulnerable. What kind of man risks everything to save 4 puppies in the middle of a war zone? The investigation that followed would reveal a story that nobody saw coming. Sergeant Michael Mitchell had been a good soldier once. The kind of soldier who followed orders, served with honor, believed in the mission. But 3 tours in Afghanistan had carved pieces out of him, leaving hollow spaces where hope used to live. His squad members would later describe the change. How he stopped laughing at jokes. How he stopped calling home. How he would stare at nothing for hours, lost in memories that played on repeat behind his eyes. The final straw came during a routine patrol in January. His unit had been ordered to clear a village suspected of harboring insurgents. The intelligence was wrong. There were no insurgents. Just families. Just children. The official report called it an unfortunate error. No fault. No blame. Just another mistake in a war full of mistakes. But Michael couldn't forget the faces. That's when he found them. 4 newborn puppies in the ruins of what had been someone's home. Their mother was dead, killed in the crossfire that had destroyed the village. The puppies were maybe 2 weeks old, crying weakly, covered in dust and debris. Michael's squad leader told him to leave them. They had a mission to complete. There was no time for strays. But Michael couldn't walk away. Something inside him, some last ember of humanity that the war hadn't extinguished, refused to let him abandon these innocent creatures. He scooped them up, tucked them inside his jacket, and carried them back to base. His commanding officer was furious. Regulations strictly prohibited keeping animals on base. It was a health risk, a security risk, a distraction from the mission. Michael didn't care. For the first time in months, he had something to protect instead of destroy. He fed them from his own rations, mixing powdered milk with water, using a syringe to drip it into their tiny mouths. He stayed up all night when they cried, holding them against his chest so they could feel his heartbeat. He named them courage, honor, faith, and hope, not for what he had, but for what he'd lost. The other soldiers thought he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. But those puppies gave him something the counselors and medications never could. They gave him purpose. They gave him a reason to make it through one more day, one more night, one more patrol. When his deployment ended, Michael faced an impossible choice. Military regulations made bringing animals back to the United States a bureaucratic nightmare. The process could take 6 months. Quarantine requirements. Veterinary clearances. Mountains of paperwork that might never be approved. The puppies were too weak to survive that long in Afghanistan. But Michael had made a promise. To them. To himself. To the memory of their mother who died in a war she never understood. He would save them. Even if it cost him everything. What Michael did next would involve a network of people who understood what it meant to leave pieces of yourself in a war zone. Veterans. Contractors. Airline workers. People who had seen too much and understood that sometimes, breaking the rules was the only way to keep your humanity intact. They arranged everything in secret. The puppies would be hidden in a military contractor's shipment. Forged documentation would get them through Frankfurt. They would arrive at O'Hare on a commercial flight, where Michael would be waiting to claim them. It was insane. It was illegal. It was the only option. But 3 days before Michael was scheduled to fly home, his vehicle hit an improvised explosive device that had been buried in a road he'd traveled 100 times before. The official report called it an accident. Equipment malfunction. Nobody's fault. Michael Mitchell died instantly. He never knew that his fellow soldiers, the ones who had called him crazy for saving those puppies, had made sure his final mission would be completed. They put those puppies on that plane. They made sure the bag would arrive in Chicago. They kept their promise to a brother who couldn't keep his own. But there was something else in that bag. Something the investigation would uncover 48 hours later. Something that would explain how Duke knew those puppies were there. Something that would prove that some connections transcend death itself. The DNA results were about to reveal a truth that nobody could have imagined. The call to Sarah Mitchell came at 2:47 in the afternoon. She was standing in her kitchen in Springfield, Illinois, making lunch for her 5-year-old son when the phone rang. Unknown number. Chicago area code. She almost didn't answer. She would later wish she hadn't. Is this Sarah Mitchell? The voice was professional, careful, the kind of voice that delivered bad news for a living. Yes, this is she. Ms. Mitchell, my name is Supervisor Linda Chun with U.S. Customs and Border Protection at O'Hare International Airport. I need to ask you a difficult question. Are you related to Sergeant Michael Mitchell? Sarah's hand tightened on the phone. She hadn't heard from Michael in over 2 years. Not a call. Not a letter. Not even an email. Their last conversation had ended with words that couldn't be taken back, wounds that couldn't heal. He's my brother. Why? What's happened? The pause that followed told her everything. Ms. Mitchell, I'm very sorry to inform you that your brother passed away 3 days ago in Afghanistan. But that's not why I'm calling. Sarah's legs gave out. She slumped against the kitchen counter, her mind struggling to process the words. Michael was dead. Her little brother. The boy who used to build pillow forts with her. Who used to check under her bed for monsters. Who came back from his first tour a stranger and never found his way back to being himself. Gone. Ms. Mitchell? Are you still there? I'm here, Sarah managed to whisper. Your brother arranged for something to be sent to you. Something that arrived at our airport today. I think you need to come to Chicago. As soon as possible. Sarah's mind was spinning. What did he send? Another pause. When Linda Chun spoke again, her professional composure had cracked completely. He sent you 4 German Shepherd puppies. They're alive, Ms. Mitchell. They're in critical condition, but they're alive. And there's a letter. From your brother. Addressed to you. Sarah closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. Even in death, even across an ocean, Michael had found a way to reach out. To apologize. To say goodbye. But Linda Chun wasn't finished. Ms. Mitchell, there's something else. Something we don't understand. Our detection dog, Duke, he found the puppies. But his behavior, it's not normal. He won't leave them. He's acting like he knows them. We need to run some tests, but we need your permission first. Sarah wiped her eyes, confusion mixing with grief. What kind of tests? DNA tests. On the puppies. We think there might be a connection we're not seeing. Meanwhile, back in the Customs veterinary facility at O'Hare, Duke was exhibiting behavior that had every expert baffled. The German Shepherd had been relieved from duty for the day, standard protocol after such an intense detection. He should have been back at the kennels, resting, eating, returning to his normal routine. But Duke refused to leave. Every attempt to lead him away from the veterinary area resulted in the same response. He would plant himself firmly on the ground, immovable as a mountain. When handlers tried to use force, Duke would emit a low growl, not aggressive, but warning. A sound that said, I'm not leaving them. So they let him stay. Duke positioned himself where he could see all 4 incubators. His eyes tracked every movement of the veterinary staff. When they handled the puppies, his ears would perk forward, alert to any sign of distress. When the puppies cried, weak, pitiful sounds that barely qualified as barks, Duke would whimper in response, as if trying to comfort them from a distance. Dr. Patricia Reeves, the head veterinarian, had worked with animals for 23 years. She'd seen remarkable things. Mothers who traveled miles to find lost offspring. Dogs who detected cancer in their owners. Cats who knew when someone was about to die. But this was different. It's like he's standing guard, she told Jake, who had also refused to leave. Like he's protecting them. Jake watched Duke carefully. From what? Dr. Reeves shook her head. I don't know. Maybe from nothing. Maybe from everything. But look at his eyes. He's not just watching them. He's connected to them somehow. The smallest puppy, the one who hadn't been breathing when they found her, was the most critical. She was in a specialized incubator, tubes providing oxygen, monitors tracking her weak heartbeat. The veterinary team had done everything they could, but her chances were slim. Duke's attention always returned to her. Hours passed. The story had already begun to leak. Airport employees whispered about the mysterious military bag. About the puppies found inside. About the detection dog who wouldn't leave them. Social media was beginning to buzz with fragments of information, theories, questions. But the real story, the full story, was still being uncovered. Jake had been digging into Sergeant Michael Mitchell's military record, and what he found painted a picture of a soldier destroyed by war. 3 tours. 47 combat missions. 2 Bronze Stars for valor under fire. 1 Purple Heart from an IED that killed 2 of his squad members and left him with shrapnel scars across his back. But it was the psychological evaluation reports that told the real story. Post-traumatic stress disorder. Severe depression. Survivor's guilt. Insomnia that kept him awake for days at a time. Nightmares that made him afraid to close his eyes. The medications they prescribed barely helped. The counseling sessions became arguments. Michael was drowning in memories that wouldn't let him go. His squad leader, contacted by phone from Afghanistan, filled in more details. Mitchell was one of the best soldiers I ever served with, Sergeant First Class Ryan Cooper said, his voice rough with emotion. But that last tour broke him. He saw things. We all saw things. But Michael couldn't separate himself from it. He carried every death, every mistake, every life he couldn't save. "Tell me about the puppies," Jake requested. There was a long pause. "Those puppies saved him." "I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. After he found them, something changed. He had bad days still, terrible days, but those puppies gave him something to fight for. Something pure in all that darkness." "How did they end up on that plane?" Another pause. Longer this time. "I can't tell you that officially. But I can tell you that Michael had brothers here. Brothers who understood. Brothers who made sure his last wish was honored." The underground network that had orchestrated the puppy's journey was more extensive than anyone imagined. It involved veterans working as military contractors who had access to shipping manifests. Airline employees who were former service members and understood the code of leaving no one behind. Customs officials in Germany who looked the other way when a bag with no passenger appeared in the cargo hold. They all risked their careers, their freedom, to fulfill a dead soldier's final mission. To bring his puppies home. To deliver them to the sister he'd never been able to face. To complete a journey that Michael would never make. It was illegal. It was beautiful. It was the kind of loyalty that couldn't be explained to anyone who hadn't been there, hadn't served, hadn't understood what it meant to lose everything and find salvation in the smallest, most unexpected places. Sarah Mitchell arrived at O'Hare at 8:15 that evening. She looked exactly like Michael. Same dark hair. Same green eyes. Same way of carrying grief that made her shoulders curve inward, as if protecting her heart from further damage. Linda Chun met her at security, escorting her through the maze of corridors to the veterinary facility. They walked in silence, Sarah clutching a worn photograph, Michael in his dress uniform, smiling, from before his first deployment. Before the war changed him. Before everything fell apart. When they entered the veterinary area, Sarah saw Duke first. The German Shepherd was exactly where he'd been for hours, standing guard over the incubators. But when Sarah walked in, something shifted. Duke's head turned. His ears perked forward. He studied her with an intensity that made her stop walking. Then Duke did something that made everyone in the room gasp. He walked over to Sarah, slowly, deliberately, and sat directly in front of her. He looked up at her with those intelligent eyes and let out a single soft whine. As if he was saying, "I've been waiting for you." Sarah knelt down, tears streaming down her face, and placed her hand on Duke's head. The dog leaned into her touch, his eyes closing briefly. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for finding them." Dr. Reeves approached carefully. "Ms. Mitchell, the puppies are stable but still critical. The smallest one especially. We're doing everything we can." Sarah stood, wiping her eyes. "Can I see them?" They led her to the incubators. 4 tiny lives fighting against impossible odds. Sarah pressed her hand against the glass, looking at each one. Courage. Honor. Faith. Hope. Michael had written their names in the letter, explaining what each one meant to him. What they represented. Why they mattered. When Sarah reached the smallest puppy's incubator, Hope, she broke down completely. "She's the one, isn't it?" Sarah asked through her tears. "She's the one who almost didn't make it?" Dr. Reeves nodded. She's fighting, but she'll make it, Sarah said with sudden conviction. She has to. Michael saved her for a reason. That's when Dr. Reeves cleared her throat. Ms. Mitchell, there's something we need to discuss. Duke's behavior with these puppies is highly unusual. We'd like to run DNA tests to see if there's a biological connection we're not aware of. It sounds impossible, but... Sarah looked from Duke to the puppies and back again. Do it, she said. Test them all. What the DNA tests would reveal 48 hours later would make headlines around the world. Because Duke wasn't just a random detection dog who happened to find these puppies. The connection between them was about to rewrite everything they thought they knew about instinct, family, and the bonds that tie souls together across impossible distances. The laboratory results were about to prove that miracles were real. The DNA results arrived at exactly 9:17 on a Thursday morning. Dr. Patricia Reeves stared at the computer screen, reading the results 3 times before she trusted what she was seeing. Her hands trembled as she picked up the phone to call Linda Chun. You need to see this. Now. And bring Officer Morrison and Duke. Within minutes, the small laboratory conference room was filled with people who had been waiting 48 hours for these results. Sarah Mitchell sat in the corner, dark circles under her eyes from sleeping in the airport hotel, refusing to leave Chicago until she knew the puppies would survive. Duke sat beside Jake, his usual professional composure replaced by something else. Something almost human in the way he watched Sarah, the way his eyes kept drifting toward the door that led to the veterinary ward where the puppies were recovering. Dr. Reeves pulled up the test results on the large screen. I've run these tests 3 times to be absolutely certain, she began, her voice filled with barely contained excitement. What we've discovered is extraordinary. She pointed to the first chart. These are the DNA markers from the 4 puppies. As expected, they're siblings. Same mother, same father. German Shepherd lineage going back several generations. Then she pulled up a second chart. This is Duke's DNA profile. We ran it for comparison, thinking maybe we'd find some distant breed connection that might explain his behavior. She paused, letting the moment build. Duke shares 23% of his DNA markers with these puppies. That's not a distant connection. That's direct lineage. These puppies are Duke's biological relatives. The room erupted in gasps and questions, but Dr. Reeves raised her hand for silence. Let me explain how this is possible. Duke comes from a very specific bloodline, military working dogs bred through a joint program between the U.S. Army and German breeders. This program has been running since the 1990s, producing some of the finest detection and patrol dogs in the world. She pulled up military records on the screen. Duke's grandmother, a German Shepherd named Stella, was bred in Germany and produced 12 litters over 8 years. Her puppies were distributed to military units worldwide. Some stayed in Germany. Some went to Iraq. Some went to Afghanistan. Jake leaned forward. You're saying? I'm saying that Duke's relatives were deployed to Afghanistan as military working dogs. One of them, likely Duke's aunt or cousin, had puppies there. These puppies. Sarah's voice cracked. Michael found Duke's family. Dr. Reeves nodded. Without knowing it, yes. The mother dog that was killed in that village, she was part of Duke's bloodline. These puppies are his kin. The silence that followed was deafening. Duke had known. Somehow, through scent or instinct or something beyond human understanding, Duke had recognized his own family in that bag. He had sensed their distress from across a crowded airport. He had refused to leave them because they were his blood. Jake looked down at Duke, tears in his eyes. You knew all along, didn't you, boy? Duke's tail wagged once, slowly, as if confirming what they all now understood. The story exploded across media within hours. Military dog saves puppies, discovers their family. The miracle at O'Hare, how one German Shepherd's instinct revealed an impossible connection. From Afghanistan to Chicago, a story of love, loss, and loyalty. CNN picked it up first. Then Fox News. Then NBC, CBS, ABC. Within 24 hours, the story had gone international. The video of Duke lying beside the incubator, licking the smallest puppy back to life, was viewed 57 million times in the first week. Comments poured in from around the world. Veterans shared their own stories of dogs they'd known in war zones. Families talked about the healing power of animals. Dog lovers wept openly at the footage of Duke standing guard over his relatives. But the most powerful moment was yet to come. 3 days after the DNA revelation, the smallest puppy, Hope, was finally stable enough to be held. Dr. Reeves carefully lifted her from the incubator, this tiny survivor who had been seconds from death when they found her. She placed Hope gently in Sarah's arms. Sarah cradled the puppy against her chest, feeling the small heartbeat against her own. Hope's eyes were just beginning to open, revealing dark brown irises that looked so much like Michael's. "Hi, baby girl," Sarah whispered. "Your daddy saved you. Your daddy loved you so much." Then Dr. Reeves did something unprecedented. She looked at Jake. "Bring Duke over." Jake hesitated. Protocol dictated that working dogs maintain professional distance. But nothing about this situation was protocol. He led Duke to Sarah and Hope. What happened next would be replayed millions of times across the internet, shared in veterinary schools and military academies, used as proof that animals understand more than we ever give them credit for. Duke approached slowly, carefully, his massive frame moving with impossible gentleness. He stretched his neck forward and touched his nose to Hope's tiny head. The puppy, eyes barely open, made a small sound, not quite a bark, more like a sigh of recognition. Duke's tail began to wag. Slowly at first, then faster. His whole body seemed to relax, as if a weight he'd been carrying had finally been lifted. He lay down beside Sarah's chair and refused to move. The message was clear: these puppies were under his protection now. Over the following weeks, all 4 puppies recovered fully. Courage grew strong and bold, always the first to explore new spaces. Honor became the quiet leader, watching over his siblings with careful attention. Faith developed a playful spirit that made everyone smile. And Hope, tiny miraculous Hope, became the heart of the little family, proving that the smallest among us often carry the greatest strength. Sarah formally adopted all 4 puppies, bringing them home to Springfield where they would grow up in the house Michael had never returned to. She placed his photograph on the mantel, surrounded by pictures of the puppies he'd saved. "He found his way home," she told her young son. "Uncle Michael found his way home through them." Duke received his 5th official commendation, but this one was different. It wasn't for detecting drugs or explosives or contraband. It was for extraordinary service in preserving life and demonstrating the unbreakable bonds of family. At the ceremony, attended by hundreds and broadcast live on local news, Duke sat proudly beside Jake as the citation was read. But the real honor came when Sarah arrived with all 4 puppies, now healthy and growing fast. Duke greeted each one, his tail wagging furiously as they climbed over him, chewing his ears, pulling his tail, treating him like the uncle he was. The crowd wept openly. Even hardened TSA agents wiped away tears. The story of Sergeant Michael Mitchell's final mission had touched something universal: the truth that love transcends death, that family finds a way to reunite, and that sometimes angels come with 4 legs and wet noses. Months later, a memorial fund was established in Michael's name to help transport military working dogs back to the United States. It raised over $3 million in the first year. Sarah became an advocate for veterans with PTSD, sharing Michael's story to help others understand the invisible wounds of war. She brought the puppies to veterans' hospitals, where they provided comfort to soldiers fighting their own battles with darkness. And Duke? He continued his work at O'Hare, but something had changed. He was gentler now with nervous travelers, more patient with children who wanted to pet him. As if his encounter with those puppies had reminded him that his job wasn't just about finding dangers, it was about protecting innocence, preserving life, and sometimes, just sometimes, performing miracles. Jake would often catch Duke looking toward the international arrivals area, his ears perked, as if listening for something only he could hear, as if waiting for the next soul who needed saving. The bond between humans and dogs goes deeper than science can explain. It transcends logic, defies probability, and sometimes reveals connections that shouldn't exist but do. Duke had proved that love recognizes its own, even across continents, even through death, even when hope seems lost. He had proved that family isn't just about blood, it's about the choice to protect, to save, to never give up on those who need us most. And in a world that often seems too dark, too broken, too far gone, Duke reminded us all that miracles still happen. They happen in the most unexpected places. In the cargo hold of international flights. In the hearts of dogs who refuse to give up. in the love of soldiers who save the innocent even when they can't save themselves. Sometimes the smallest lives carry the biggest messages. Sometimes the quietest heroes make the loudest impact. And sometimes, just sometimes, love really does find a way home. Now I need you to do something important. If this story touched your heart, if you believe in the power of the bond between humans and animals, I need you to share it. Share it with someone who needs to believe in miracles today. Share it with a veteran who needs to know they're not alone. Share it with anyone who's ever been saved by the love of a dog. Leave a comment below telling me about a time when an animal showed you that love is stronger than logic. When did a dog, a cat, or any creature prove to you that they understand more than we think? Your story might be exactly what someone needs to read today. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because every week, I share stories that prove love exists in the most unexpected places. Stories that remind us why we're here, why connections matter, and why hope is never truly lost. Remember this: you never know when you'll be the miracle someone is praying for. You never know when your kindness will save a life. And you never know when a dog's loyalty will remind you what really matters. Until next time, this is Heart of a Dog, reminding you that love always finds a way home.